Oh, yeah, last time it wasn't on that view. If the when the green light's flashing, that should be working. So I might give it to you to start with. Perfect. Okay. Come on in, come on in. Don't sit at the back. Sit near the front. I'm one of those people. All right, we'll get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. It's lovely to see so many faces, lots of familiar faces and some new faces. For those who've never met me before, my name is Caroline, and I'm the Employability Programs Officer in the Careers Centre here at CDU, and I'll be your MC for today's event. Those coming in, please don't sit at the back. Come forward, find some seats. There's plenty of seats near the front. Hello also to our online visitors today. It's great to have you with us. Thank you for joining us online. So today we have a fantastic event for you where you're going to hear a huge amount of information, advice, stories from people who are where you want to be when you've finished your studies. So strap in, it's going to be a great event. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today, the Larrakia people, the traditional custodians of this beautiful place, Darwin, which they call Gulmerijan. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respects to First Nations people of Australia here today and First Nations people from countries across the world. In the event of an emergency, please follow CDU staff and head straight back out the doors that you came through. There will be photos taken of today's event. If you specifically don't want to appear in any photos, please make sure that you notify the photographer and they'll check the photos before they put them on any social media. The bathrooms are back out the doors you came through and to the left and the right of the lecture theatre. So this is our fourth Insights to Industry event with Social Work and Psychology. Hands up if you've been to one before. Okay, fantastic. Some repeat customers. Excellent. Well, Kim, you're definitely a repeat customer. Hello. So the Insights to Industry program is designed to equip students and graduates, maybe, if you've already graduated, with a comprehensive understanding of career options and effective strategies for securing roles in this industry. This is an opportunity for you to connect with industry professionals, build your professional networks through the networking that we have after the panel, and to learn about the amazing opportunities and the many varied pathways that exist for you with the qualification that you will gain from CDU. There are so many people to thank for this event today. The industry partners on our panel, thank you very much for sharing your stories and wisdom. We also have a huge number of industry representatives outside ready to talk to you after the panel has finished. So take that opportunity and talk to them all. Create those connections, build your networks, and really get the most out of this event. Also, thanks to our champion academics and faculty staff who are always helping us out, making sure that these events are known to our students. So special thanks to Kim, Angus, Diane, Andrew, Nicole, and Dennis. And we also have two student volunteers helping us out today, Fatima and Funbi. So thank you so much to our students as well. Okay, that's enough from me. Time to hear from our panelists. So first up, I would just like you to tell us your name, please, and where you currently work, and then we'll get into the fun stuff.
Okay, so can people hear me? Is this working? Wonderful. My name is Karen Broadfoot. I'm the Deputy CEO for Territory Families, Housing and Communities.
Thank you. I'm Angela Van Roden. I'm a clinical psychologist and I work at Danila Dilba on the social and emotional wellbeing team.
My name's Vicky Ann Martin Moller. I work for the Health Department, NT Health Department. I'm currently the professional lead for the social workers in the Northern Territory, but I'm also a senior case manager out at Palmerston Community Care Centre.
My name is Meredith Jordan. I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm the professional lead for psychology for Northern Territory Health. So I work alongside Vicky in our lead role.
Hello everyone, my name is John. I work at Melaleuca Australia in Darwin as a counsellor.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. When you were small, when you were young, and people would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Was deputy CEO, was clinical psychologist, was professional lead? Was that part of your dream? When I grow up, this is what I want to be?
When I was young, I certainly did not expect or even necessarily want to be a counsellor. I didn't think it was one of my strengths, but I thought perhaps some kind of science, but maybe not psychological science. So it was quite accidental that I fell into psychology, but so glad I did. I love it.
I think as a young girl, I was not wooed by being a ballet dancer, but I decided that being an airline hostess was just the bee's knees. I think my parents quickly massaged that into being a pilot. And I nursed that career aspiration till I was about 16 and went to a careers expo where the Air Force was there and they took one look at my short-sightedness and went, no chance, you've got of being a pilot. So I went, what'll I do? And my mum and dad said, look, you just speak to people everywhere. You should be a social worker. And I went, that sounds really hard. And I'll be interested to hear from Vicky later on about that. I said, oh, what about just a psychologist? And I'm not actually really sure I knew really what I was signing up for, other than it was with people and it sort of fitted. And that's where I went from there.
Fantastic.
So no, I would not have. The reason being is that I didn't really like going to school. I fought with my mum. She wanted all of her children to go to year 12. It just was not allowed that you could leave any earlier. And I went to year 10 and then I went to business college for a year and became a stenographer. So no, and I just didn't feel that I would even be able to do a degree because I wasn't academic at all. And I guess as a teenager, I wanted to work with children. What ended up happening is that I ended up in the industry of working with long-term unemployed people and then got an interest in, you know, doing counselling and getting my degree and yeah, surprised myself. I got through it and then went on to further studies, but definitely not as a child.
And me, no, either. As far back as I can remember, early conversations with my mum, all I wanted to do was get married and have babies. I know, okay, that was it. But there were a couple of little clues that I might end up in the helping industry. One of them was that I would always end up, if I was visiting somebody, doing their dishes or helping them, you know, like with something and really loving those people. So there was a little clue, but I think the biggest clue was my report card in around grade 3. Angela would do so much better if she would just stop talking. Okay. And then I think the clincher for me and what started me at CDU, I saw a little pop-up message on a computer one day that just said, do you want to see people set free from their life-controlling problems? And I put my hand up, then I enrolled, and the rest is history. Yeah.
History that we will explore.
Well, for me, it was when I was very young, I was going to be a farmer's wife. I grew up in the country. That was my big ambition. Then I was going to be a jockey. Gave up on that idea after I started working as a stable hand and rode my first lot of racehorses, got thrown a couple of times, and also realised that waking up at 3:30 in the morning really wasn't for me. Still love the horses, but jockey was not it. It wasn't until really late in high school, actually, that I even contemplated the idea of social work. And that was after doing some work around with young people and certainly getting to know some of the systems that we have around disability because of a younger sister that I have with a disability. So that's what then steered me more towards social work.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I wonder if for any of you in the room, that question resonates. Maybe what you're doing right now was not part of your plan when you were a young person. And if any university knows about, midlife career changes, it's this university. Over 75% of our students are mature age. So you've probably come from a different background, from a different industry, from a different profession, and you're almost starting again. Well, you can see from our panelists that that's a pretty common story. So you're in good company here today. So now that you have shared with us the beginnings, maybe you could share with us a little bit more about your study pathway and what you did to get yourself into this industry.
Okay, so for me, firstly, when I first formed the idea of becoming a social worker, you actually couldn't get into social work straight out of school. You had to be 21 in order before you could even consider applying. So I started my post-school work as a legal secretary, which was actually a very good grounding in administration, can I say? So that was very useful for me. And I still had this idea that I wanted to be in social work. And it was something that while I was really actually quite enjoying being a legal secretary, I was working in a stockbroker's office at the time. And we were all working really, really hard. And I remember going into this individual that I worked for and saying on behalf of the bit of a social work advocate there, working in and going, look, everyone's working really, really hard. You all get all these bonuses at the end of the year. And we're thinking that that's not very fair. We're not unionised at all at that point. And he looked at me and he said, well, if you want to earn more money, you need to go and get a degree. It's got nothing to do with me. So I handed in my resignation a week later, did the mature aged entrance exam to get into university, and then got into university, and that's how I became a social worker. So I started work at, started my university with Uni SA. So back in South Australia, that's where I got my degree at the McGill campus, if anyone knows South Australia. And it wasn't until after my first placement, which I did at a child protection office, that I realised that child protection was the area I really wanted to work in. So, and then I sort of changed my electives and that to gear towards that as a career pathway.
Inspirational. So my first job was at Coles. Okay, Coles at Casuarina, and that was just before Cyclone Tracy. So I'm a bit of self-disclosure there. You can work out my age. And that was great. I loved working at Coles. And then I did get married and have babies, like as I had always anticipated as a young child. But two of my children have autism, and so I was at home as a carer, and I was doing some volunteer work where I learned all my skills, learned how to run an office, learned how to count money, learned how to use a computer and be a secretary in a volunteer kind of capacity in an organisation. And when my children then were old enough to move into supported accommodation, that's when I just took that step that I said, I put my hand up to say, yes, I'd like to see people set free from their life controlling problems. And I started university when I was 42. So it's never too late, right, to start. And I started here at CDU, did my behavioural science degree and my honours here, and then just had a little bit of a gap just to take care of family. And I was very fortunate then along that pathway to be doing my 4+2. For those who are doing psychology, they're phasing it out or phased it out, I think now, which meant I got the opportunity to actually start working in the profession as a school counsellor whilst I got my registration under my belt. And I, a bit like Karen, I tailored my interest and study and a master's in counselling to the areas that I was working in, working with kids, working with adolescents, working in the AOD field. So with something really strategic about our learning pathway and marrying that to the work that we're doing. And then I was very fortunate after my registration to win a placement at Charles Sturt University in their Masters in Clinical Psychology. And there is so much financial support available through scholarships and Commonwealth funded positions in the uni. It was tailored so beautifully to someone who was living in Darwin and just needing to travel down for residential schools. Everything that I needed to purchase was taken care of through the scholarships and the funding that I received. So was able to come out of that without a HECS debt, which was a really fantastic thing. Came through and then did my registrar program whilst I've been at Danila for 5.5 years. So as a clinical psychologist, sort of came through that pathway. Yeah, it was beautiful.
So I also got married at a young age and had my children, and my future was going to be a stay-at-home mum, because that's those days, that's what happened. You don't see it much these days due to finances. And so that was my whole world. I was going to stay at home. And then we were living in Sydney, and I saw a job advertised in a temporary job where they wanted lots of people working for the Bureau of Statistics. And so I started in that job, and I actually quite liked having my own money and being able to do some things for myself instead of having to work within a budget. So that was the start of thinking, you know, I really want to work rather than being a stay-at-home mum, even though the kids were still young. And then working in the public service, you do get to do some little short courses and things like that. So I did some certificate 4 in community services and that sort of thing. And then I got a job in the Commonwealth Employment Service, and a lot of you won't even know what that was, but it was before Centrelink days and before the job network. And we got to work very extensively with people with disabilities, single mums, long-term unemployed. I also worked with prisoners coming out of jail. And I was lucky while I was at the Commonwealth Employment Service, they had this degree that they were paying for us to learn to be proper case managers. And I thought, oh, I wonder whether I can, because I'm definitely not academic and I don't use, you know, big words, but I did. And that was through Deakin University, and I actually did quite well, and I got some distinctions, and so I did a degree in case management and dealing with unemployed clients. Then the Commonwealth Employment Service unfortunately closed down, and it was actually my life. I'd been with them for 19.5 years, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, you know, what am I going to do? And of course, there was quite a big redundancy package. So I thought, well, I might try and stay at home and study social work. And I enrolled in what it was called then the Northern Territory University. But unfortunately, during that time, the uni lost their accreditation, and I went back to work. And but then I came back to social work again and started studying while I was working at Centrelink. And at Centrelink, I got employed as what you call a personal advisor. And that was a beautiful job, because you were working with people that were disadvantaged, and you were doing a plan with them, doing goals of what they wanted to achieve. And that went for a couple of years, and I'm just studying social work really slowly, 1 unit per semester. Then the funding for the personal advisors finished, and we had to go on the front line as customer service officers. And there I am on that front line going, next, please, next, please. And I'm thinking, you have to get back in and you have to finish that degree, and you have to do it as hard as you can. So picked it up to 2 or 3 units, plus working and being up all night to 5 o'clock in the morning, getting a couple of hours sleep, going into Centrelink and saying next, please, till I got my degree. And then I had hoped and wished that I would get a job at Centrelink, and it didn't happen. And I got really upset. but I then applied for a job at the hospital in NT Health, best thing I ever did, because it took me out of my comfort zone of just working with the same type of clients in unemployment or Centrelink. And I've never looked back. I've went on to Flinders University and did a graduate diploma in grief, loss and trauma counselling, which has been very relevant to working within NT Health. And then went on and did a management course. So the little girl at school who wasn't academic soon become academic. But there's a time when you come as old as I am now and I say, no more study, just do your work.
Sure,
So
Vicky.
that's where I'm at.
Sure.
I'll look that way.
I knew I had 6 years of psychology to do clinical psychology at uni. So I decided I might need a break before I go straight on from year 12 to uni. So I spent a year going overseas to England and working for Barnardo's in some type of sort of voluntary exchange with children with intellectual and physical disabilities in a boarding school. So that was a really, really good experience. And I did a bit of nannying while I was over there to make my way around a bit more Europe before coming back. I grew up in Canberra, so I went to the Australian National University and I did my 3-year undergraduate degree in arts. You could do it as arts or a science in those days. So I chose to do it in arts with a bit of sociology and anthropology mixed in there, and then did honours. I wrote my thesis in adolescent housework, and everyone goes, oh, what did you find out? And I said, not much. Adolescents don't do very much housework. Though that was really because I wanted to do something a bit more clinically oriented, and ANU was very much renowned for its rats and stats in those days. I then did the 2 years clinical masters, and again, doing it way back in the 90s, there was not a huge HEC step. So I did have a HEC step when I came out after my 6 years, but it was nothing like I think it could be in this day and age. So look out for scholarships, guys. So that was sort of my pathway through. And along the way, I worked at Sizzler, I worked at KFC, I worked at Pizza Hut, and then managed to get myself into youth work. So during my 4th and 5th year of uni, which was starting to get a bit closer to where I wanted to go. And then during my placements for my masters, I managed to get a job 1 day a week at the Canberra Hospital while finishing off my training. So that was sort of a foot into the door with health, and stay tuned for the next episode, I guess.
The only psychology I did in high school was 1 hour just to get out of it doing a chemistry test. So I just quickly went in there and then came back. But after a gap year in which I worked at a primary school, I went down south to Adelaide to Uni SA and completed a Bachelor of Psychological Science with a major in cognitive neuroscience. So that really spoke to me at the time, the sort of hooking up wires to people's heads and things like that. Brain scans was very interesting. Doing, they'd swap out the counselling sort of courses for like anatomy, biochem, that sort of thing. So again, that really spoke to me. But after 3 years of that, I thought, you know what, maybe I should have done the counselling courses. So I ended up doing a Master of Counselling and Psychotherapy at the University of Adelaide, and then finished that degree during COVID, started my first job out of uni during COVID. So telehealth with Gamblers Help team. I was in regional Victoria. So gambling addictions really, I think, understated compared to many other types of addictions people can experience, but certainly a very destructive and important one. And while I worked part-time, I also enrolled in a graduate diploma of psychology at the University of Adelaide. So did complete that this year. But currently, like, decided to move up to Darwin, wanted to be back in the Northern Territory, great place, and moved up here and thought, look, I'll do something different. So applied at Melaleuca Australia, and they were happy to take me. So happy I started there. If you get an opportunity to volunteer there, I highly recommend it. But yeah, this is only my second job out of formal studies. So still a lot to go.
Well, John, we'll stay with you. So my next question is about during your studies. So imagining that you were where these students are right now, is there anything that you would have done differently during your studies to help you in the path to follow?
Yeah, I guess it's convenient that I mentioned volunteering. I would recommend that you volunteer while you're studying. It would give you more experience. You'll get more references. So it's certainly an issue if you just out of uni, you don't have much experience. An issue can be getting references, because you need references no matter what experience you've got. You need references when you apply for a job. So if you can do volunteering, either at a place that you'd like to work, or even somewhere that maybe you just want to get some experience, but you're focusing on another area, I'd highly recommend do some volunteering, get to know the people there, get them to see how good you are, to trust you, and to give you a great reference when you apply for a job.
I would absolutely agree with John. Really important. And particularly, I have seen a couple of people who've spent a lot of time at uni, and I know it's meant to be a millennial thing to have 7 careers in your life, but really, you know, when you forked out a lot of time and effort and you get to your 6th year of psychology and you say, oh, I don't really like sitting and listening and talking to people all day, you probably shouldn't have signed up for clinical psychology. So I think, you know, there's lots of different options, but I would say that trying it out along the way. I think over one of my long uni holidays, I volunteered at a drug withdrawal centre. I had done my master's thesis on methadone maintenance, heroin use in methadone maintenance users. So certainly that was an interest at the time. But yes, certainly voluntary work and signing up for all the little things. We did field trips to some maximum security prisons, which I was really interested in at the time, and unfortunately haven't had a chance to work in prisons. There were lots of things you could just put your hand up for. And one of the things that I had done was I'd started going to the Australian Psychological Society local branch meetings, which was really unusual. I looked about 10 when I was at uni, I reckon. So it's really unusual that this young girl was going along to these branch meetings. And so I got to know the academics a little bit more and work out who the clinical psychologists were who are academics, which I didn't know to start with. I got to meet them. Registration came into the ACT. So, you know, you get invited to the dinner and you meet more psychologists. So doing things which are a bit boring, I sat through quite a few AGMs, and I'm not sure I'd recommend that as an exciting activity, but more as the people you met, ringing up people, contacting people, all of those sorts of things. So certainly on your page, John, with volunteering, make sure you try before you buy.
I would say for me, because when I was studying, I was lucky I had experience in the industry for many years. So, but I was the student rep for the NT branch of the Australian Social Work Association. I recommend that if you're a student and you're interested in the NT branch, put your name up, because they can have 1 or 2 students on those branch, and every month you're meeting with professionals, you're learning about the industry, and that helped me a lot. And I went on and stayed on that committee for 10 years and was the NT president for a number of years. So going as a student was the start of it. I do agree, if you don't have any experience in the industry, please get out there and try and do some volunteer work. Or if you're able to even get a part-time job in the industry that you're interested in. I know when you're studying, it's sometimes hard to also be working, but as you're getting towards the end of your degree, a lot of agencies in the Northern Territory will take people on that are particularly in their 3rd and 4th year. That's because of the shortage of staff here. We're different to other states. So if you can get into an agency, even on a part-time basis, they then sometimes will give you study leave to be attending. When I was at Centrelink, I used to get study leave to come up to my tutes. The only other thing I can say is that I sort of wish that I'd taken, when I first started studying at NTU, a bit more seriously and tried to do a lot more than I did, than having to wait a couple of years and then not like the job I'm in and go back and then really put my head down. And the other thing is to follow what the university says to do in your units, because I was all over the place. I had some 1st year units I still hadn't done in psychology. Every time I enrolled in psychology, I'd be sitting in this big theatre going, I don't like this, I don't like this lecture. So I had units all over the place, some in first year, some third, fourth year, and second year. I do not recommend that because there's a reason why they all follow in sequence and they relate to this one and that one. Please don't do that. It was quite embarrassing being in my fourth year and having to do psychology part A and B.
That's beautiful. I agree with everything that everybody said, but to answer your question, I don't know that I'd really change anything that I did other than perhaps back myself a bit more, trust my decisions a bit more. And so if you've got a passion for something, follow it, allow yourself the flexibility to go and have a little play and explore some of those things. Well, I was very fortunate with the work that I was doing alongside my studies, particularly when it came to like research projects, third year and honours projects. The workplaces I was in allowed me access with consent from the participants to actually do my research project right there, you know, and it might not have been, you know, something that somebody else might have thought was really interesting, but for me it was a means to an end. I really wanted to learn something. I wanted to dig my teeth into something, and beautiful Mary Morris used to say to me, Angela, just take a bite of the apple and you're not trying to research the whole orchard, just be mindfully present with what you were doing. That was something that really worked for me. So I really, in the research areas that I looked at was about people looking at barriers to employment. When I was working for an employment agency that was looking at that with people. And so I found the whole process really stimulating. So, but yeah, like I said, just really backing yourself, all of the skills that I would draw on today to talk with my clients about, I would have probably, you know, applied some of those in hindsight, you know, learn how to be present, you make the stress work for you, and just enjoy the journey. Yeah.
My advice is going to be really practical. Don't start your essay the day before. It's meant to be handed in.
From experience there?
Very much so, yes. A number of long-suffering nights I endured. But also just, I think, reiterating what other people are saying, one of the, as I said, benefits for me was doing my first placement. I already knew I had an interest in child protection, but doing that first placement really solidified it for me. So do think about what you might like to do. Choose your placements, really pay attention in those placements to how it fits, how that sort of work fits with your values, fits with what it is that you want to achieve, and gives you that passion and ongoing interest. Because a lot of the work we do, whether it's psychology, whether it's social work, it can be really hard work. It can also be incredibly rewarding work. So if you can find your niche, it's really beneficial. I've now been working in child protection for well over 20 years. Don't need to get into that level of detail, but well over 20 years. And I can say that when I was at the McGill campus, I was the only student there when they did a quiz around who wants to work where that identified child protection as the place to work. So I think it is about being broad, thinking about what you want to do, and then finding that place that really matches your values. Yep.
So on that, I mean, so far we've talked about the different types of clients in social work and psychology. So in child protection, disadvantaged people, young people, First Nations people, people with disabilities, prisoners, the long-term unemployed, people who are grieving and going through loss. So many different pathways and groups of people that you can work with, and finding your niche, finding that. Is there any advice on how our students can do that? Or is it through volunteering and placements and networking and you know, being part of those professional associations? Is there any other way that you would recommend that our students hone in to find out what their niche is?
I think, well, for me, I think for me, it was really around why I wanted to be a social worker and what that looked like. And for me, it was observing what was happening around me. And I think I referred earlier to my younger sister and watching her and her disability and the real struggle she had with systems. And one of the things that I wouldn't have been able to articulate it back then, but after doing a degree and all of those sorts of things, you learn the lingo. But what I worked out very quickly, and what really brought me to say social work as a profession, is what is really the potential and the fact of very disadvantaged people, and the system abuse that occurs. So with all the best of intentions and everything else, any system out there is can essentially can expose people to that system's abuse. And that, for me, when I then was looking at where I want to fit as a social worker, child protection called to me, I think, because you are often dealing with the very, very disadvantaged and disenfranchised. You're often cutting across everything from housing, poverty, disability, mental health, alcohol, domestic, pretty much anything that fits someone within a category of disadvantage, you will deal with in child protection. And the level of power in that system, if you don't have a very keen eye to it, and must have a keen eye to it constantly, the potential for systems abuse to occur is very, very high. And that, to me, is what always keeps my eye on the ball and has kept me very much within child protection. Because while I can't fix everything for everyone all of the time, every single time I'm looking at a case, or I'm become aware of a situation that's happening, that is one of the key things that I'm looking for. So it's less about the individual attributes of the client for me than it is about the system that we're working in, and how much that actually goes to helping people as opposed to harming people.
How do you follow that? Oh my gosh, no, it's awesome. Coming back to the question, yeah, like how to encourage, I think, and Karen used the word much earlier too, about tapping into your own values. I think, how do we know which direction we're going to go? All we have to do is look at how we operate on a day-to-day basis. What are the things that fire you up? What are the things that you find yourself getting passionate about? If you take enough time to really listen to that, or even ask someone to feed back to you, what do you notice about me? How do I deal in that situation? You'll probably get a really good picture of what that calling into the workplace is going to be for you. I was very motivated to work in school counselling. I have no idea why. And so, so what I did in my last year of uni, in my honours, about halfway through the year, I found a job at Catholic Care, actually. And it said, for a social worker. I rang them up and I said, look, I'm in my 4th year at uni. I'm really keen, to step into the school counselling space. What do I need to do? And they, Jane said to me, when you get your transcript from uni, give me a call and, we'll see if there's any positions. Well, the moment that I got my transcript, so you see, be assertive. Don't be afraid to ask the question. People are only going to say yes or no. I rang up and she said, look, just come on in and bring your transcript in. I walked out with a job ready to start the beginning of the next year. So, don't be afraid to have a go, particularly if it's something that you feel really interested in. And as a result of that, I worked for a long time as a school counsellor, and gradually just found that it was something that I really loved. But when it's time to extend and to grow, and just to be able to say yes to the opportunities that present, you soon know whether it's what you're meant to be doing. Yeah. And a bit like what Karen has talked about, understanding systemically where you sit. I work in an organisation on the program which is social and emotional wellbeing. And again, if you're looking at the things that impact on a person's social and emotional wellbeing, it's going to be all of those same factors that Karen has spoken about today. So it's a win-win. It's a win for you as a clinician. It's very, very rewarding to be able to walk that journey with somebody. Doesn't matter how small it might seem, but it's also doing something to chip away at some of those systemic sort of issues that really get in the way. So rather than, how are we going to throw millions of dollars at fixing domestic violence? What are we going to do at early intervention so that kids have got housing and they've got food and, you know, they learn how to live in a safe environment? Yeah, so sorry, a bit passionate about that too. I'll pass it on to you.
So there's not a particular area that I was passionate in. I'm more a general type of social worker. So I get passionate with my clients. So I don't, you know, I know some people, they really want to work with children, or they really want to work with babies, or they really want to work with aged care. And I'll share an experience when I was at the hospital. I worked in the maternity and special care nursery for 2 years. And I loved it. That was a privilege to be working with young mums, that their babies might pass away and that you're there to support them, or that the children are born with a major disability. And at the hospital, sometimes we voluntary rotate around, but sometimes the manager might move us around according to needs. And I remember I got transferred from the maternity special care nursery to the aged care dementia unit. And I thought, oh my goodness, you know, what I'm going to do there. You know, these aged people are aged and they're dying and they've got dementia. And I had to go to an external supervisor and sit down, and I'll tell you who it was. It was Pamela Trotman. Some people might know her. And she said to me, don't you think that aged people also have rights, that they want this and that? And now I'm getting old, I can see, yes, you do. But at the time I was so passionate, you know, and you say to somebody, I'm working in the special care nursery, they straight away think, oh, you know, what a good job. But you say to people you're working with aged dementia people, or, you know, so I had to learn another perspective, that every single person has a right to be equally supported. And those people, their families were going through grief and loss of that these people had lost their identity in that. So I had to wholly newly learn how to work. So anti-health has been good for me in the way that for the 11 years at the hospital, I've worked in every single ward, in an ICU and emergency where it's acute care and that. And now as a case manager in primary health, I don't know what clients I'm getting. I get young ones, I get middle-aged ones, I get aged ones. So I don't have a passion for a particular thing. I have a passion for helping someone, empower them to reach the goals that they want, and to be able to say we were able to do something. I don't have a passion for any particular item. And I will share one other thing. When I was working at Centrelink, I wanted to stay as a social worker at Centrelink because it was very good pay. I got airfares for myself and my children. I didn't want to lose that. And so I was so centred on working in that industry. Sometimes it's good to step out of your comfort zone and explore another industry. If you feel like you're burning out where you are, move on to another totally different industry and you'll become a fresh social worker or psychologist again.
It was great to hear Vicky saying that she just really wanted to be a social worker, because I would say I just wanted to be a psychologist and I didn't really mind where. And I guess there was a thought maybe a permanent job somewhere. But I've actually spent my whole career in health. And thanks to a husband in the Air Force, I've worked in the ACT, and I've worked in Newcastle, and I've worked in Western Australia, and I've worked in Sydney, and now I'm in Darwin and loving it. And it is really interesting because I had peers in my master's who said, I really want to work with children. And I'd actually be really interested how many are working with children now. And I didn't particularly mind. I thought, prison would be interesting, but really it was what job came up. And I've actually now spent probably 50-50 in my career working with adults and then working with children. I guess probably for the majority of my career now, I've really specialised in working in hospitals. So with patients who have medical conditions and supporting their psychological wellbeing. And that sort of just came to me. It was applying for a job. I've also worked in child and adolescent mental health and adult mental health, and they were really, really good grounding experiences for me. But I guess then moving into state and applying for whatever job came up, and then thinking, oh, I really enjoy actually that interface between our physical and our mental health. So it allowed me to really specialize. I think one of the benefits of working in health, and also really transferable. So I'm leaving one state and transferring over to health for the next, so that at least I could get my long service leave after having worked for 10 years and some of those advantages there. So I apologise, I can't say which niche to work into, but maybe sometimes, as I said, keeping an open mind. I have done a little bit of work with older people and really enjoyed it. So maybe not defining yourself too much early on. I think if you're enjoying what you're doing, it transfers. People are people, and it's really nice to work with them.
Yeah, really, I was about to say that basically if you're just starting out, don't close doors if you don't have to. Try something first and then say that you don't like it, because you can never really know what's behind a closed door without opening it and looking behind. So yeah, if you're just starting out, just I guess take it easy. Don't get too set on one particular set of clients. It's good to have passion, I suppose, but sometimes it's good to find out what you don't like before you find out what you do. And I would also say, don't be afraid to, especially in job interviews, get the organisation to explain to you perhaps what's so good about working there. Often we'll be on the other end of the table, and they'll be asking, why should you be working here? Don't be afraid to ask, well, why should I be working here? What is it like working here? What are the clients like? What is the day-to-day work like? I think getting that kind of background can be really helpful.
Perfect segue. This was not planned at all, I promise you. The next question is about our students going through that recruitment process. So applying for jobs, doing their resumes, having interviews. From people who are in the industry, what are you looking for? What do you want students to talk about in terms of transferable skills, in terms of their experiences? What are you wanting to hear from them as they're going through that recruitment process?
Well, now I feel a bit weird being on the first person to answer that. I suppose don't be afraid to talk yourself up. Obviously, don't completely fabricate your life story, but there's some expectation that you're going to advocate for yourself. And if you can't really advocate for yourself, the person who is conducting the interview might be wondering, well, can you advocate for my organisation then? So, don't be afraid to just put it all out there, because I think recruiters would prefer that than finding all these wonderful things afterwards. But yeah, I think people who are far more experienced than myself should take this.
I got the opportunity to be on panels later in my career, and I wish I'd had the chance to do that early on, because it's really nice to be on the other side and actually think, now I can see what works best. Generally with jobs, there's a contact person that you're meant to ring, and I would say always, always, always ring that contact person. I have run contact people at crazy times of morning, 6 a.m. in the morning when I was in Western Australia and had to speak to a contact, a very busy pain medicine specialist, and you just have to really contact that contact person and talk to them, get the idea from the job. Yes, it's great to go in for the interview, but in interviews, you usually have, it seems like half an hour in these days. So really talk to them for as long as you can. If you can talk to a contact person for an hour, tick, that's a great idea. Talking to them about what the job is, what it entails, I think everything that John said, it's really, really important thing to do. That would be my main recommendation. And knowing that you're probably, if you're really early on going for a job, to get feedback about how you went in the interview. Certainly, sometimes I saw fairly junior psychologists going for the same position as I might be going for later in the career. And, it was a it was nothing to do with the fact they didn't get it. But certainly if they'd rung up and said, why didn't I get the job? Well, they might have said, well, we've just given it to someone who's had, 15 years of experience. So really important to get feedback about that. And I guess always having an idea why you're going for that job. I've only once been somewhere where it was, why are you going for this job? And they went, oh, I needed a job, or it was part-time. That did not cut it with me. I'm like, this is a really specific job. If you just want a job, go down to McDonald's, not a problem with me. So even if you're not sure why you really, really want that job, make up something, talk to someone who can tell you about it, why, have a really good think about that.
So I have 20 years experience in the Commonwealth Employment Service and 5 years experience in the job network. I'm going to tell you now that some of the hints that I used to do with the longer term unemployed people. First of all, like has been said, you need to sell yourself. Do not tell lies. Employers are not idiots. They will ask you questions if they're doubting you. If you've said something that you have not done, and they're doubting you, they will ask questions. Never tell lies. Be honest, but be confident about yourself. You need to sell yourself. You are a product that you are selling for a potential employer. So the confidence has to be there. The first question that most employers ask is, tell me a bit about yourself. I used to get people to research that while I was listening to them, but also for them to research it to their mum or dad or somebody in their family, and also to do it in front of a mirror. You need to be able to have a statement about yourself, because that is the start of the rapport with that employer. Another thing that I suggest, you need to have researched the company that you're going for, because they will ask you, why do you want to work here? And if you can start rattling off the programs that they have, they will be amazed. You can even tell them that you've been on their website and you've had a look or researched, so that you know what that company or organisation is all about. That really sells employers as well, because you've taken the time to take an interest in it. If you're going for a job that's got a selection criteria, get a highlighter. Start looking at your skills that you've got against what the essential criteria is. Highlight those areas and have some keywords that you can say to the employer that is going to address the essential criteria. There is also desirable criteria, and it's good to have that, but you must be able to sell yourself enough that you've got all of that essential criteria. So I used to also train people in doing job applications, and we would do a mud map. People know what a mud map is? And you'd put sections down all over this paper of what the keywords were, then underneath list your skills and research that, because you need to meet the essential criteria. Desirable doesn't matter, it's good to have it, but especially with government jobs, if it's got essential criteria there, like I've been on selection panels as well, and we have people apply that haven't finished their degree, and it will say that you do have to have that degree. Straight away, you're not interviewed if it's a government one, because we have to have a qualified person. Always ask for feedback afterwards if you weren't selected, because that will give you some hints for the next time. And just have with you, when you go for the interview, your resume, and in case you need to look down and they might ask you a question about it, your qualifications, have a folder. Make a folder up with all things in it, what's good about you. And don't forget to mention things like having volunteered somewhere or that you've had previous skills before. I've even worked with prisoners that have been in prison. Now, you don't have to say you've been in prison, but unfortunately there will be a space if they've been in, the ones that I worked with had been in for long term. There's a big space. So we'd work around what they might say about that, and it's discrimination for them not to employ them unless it's in a job where, like say it was fraud. Well, you're not going to work in a bank, but you know, there's ways that you've got to get around that, and we rehearse that. The other thing I used to do is get people to get little cards, and they'd write a pretend question on one side and the answers on the back, and then they shuffle it around and they're researching that. That was more for big jobs like within government, where they're going to spend quite a long time with you. I just want you to know a bit about where you're going to, have confidence in yourself, and please do not lie, because employers will catch you out.
Wow. All those wealth of years of experience. I don't really have too much else to add, but I would say if you get called in to come and have an interview, then be confident. I mean, you've got that interview based on how you've presented already through your application process. So, be confident. Don't be desperate, but just be confident that you're sitting there earning that place. So that would be one thing. Secondarily, you may or may not have some work experience, but you have a whole lot of life experience. So please don't discount your life experience when it comes to speaking in an interview. You may not have got paid for doing some of those things, but you may be really, really skilled in something. So don't be afraid to bring that aspect of your personhood, because it's not just the skill set, it's who you are as a person that's coming into that role. Your values, what you carry, how you hold on certain positions are really important factors when it comes to winning a position. I'd also say, as you read the room, being able to just be really comfortable and be yourself and allow that to shine. And look, if humour's your thing and it's feeling like it's okay, then allow that to be present. May I share just a little scenario? At the very end of my interview for Danila Dilba, it's when I was working in the clinics, they said to me, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask us? And I said, well, I live in Malak. And they said to me, is that your way of telling us that you'd like to work at the Malak Clinic? And we had this big laugh around the table. And yeah, so just be yourself and enjoy the process, but really be confident because you've won that position.
The only very quick thing I'll add is, particularly for government jobs, the process is a little bit flipped here in the Northern Territory in that it is referees. So make sure you have your referees lined up, make sure they know what you're applying for, and talk to them about how you meet the selection criteria. That will really help, because the referee responses will actually outweigh your interview. So do line up a referee. And when you are in an interview and responding, that really good advice around looking at the JD and the essential criteria. Think of examples. It's really, really important to be authentic, be yourself, be authentic, and have examples around what you've done, and think about it broadly. You don't have to have done exactly the same thing. It's about transferable skills. So look at the selection criteria, think about anything that could possibly fit within that realm, and then talk about how that experience and that example transfers into that context.
My favourite example of that transferable skills is time management. And if you are a student and you're studying and working and you have a family, you've got time management nailed. If you're passing, you've got time management nailed. So absolutely think about those transferable skills and all the different possible ways that you can evidence them through paid work, through volunteer work, through your family and personal experiences. So many different ways that you can demonstrate those fabulous skills that you have that the employers are looking for. Looking at my phone, we have reached 4 o'clock, which means that it's time now to throw over to our audience for any questions. And once we finish there, then it's heading outside to do some networking. So over to you now, students. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists? We have one at the back. Now we do have some roving. Got one at the front, please. That one.
How do you find transferring from attending university or studying and then going into your first job from there? Because how do you transfer all the education and being in a classroom into actually physically doing the job?
Just Do you want each of us to answer these questions, or how do you want to do it?
Some people, if they have
I'll do one very quick response. I think your placements will help you a lot with that, and your placement supervisors. I'm talking from a social work point of view. It's a really good opportunity to work through how you take all of that theory in your head and actually apply it in real world situations. Because sometimes that academic sitting back is not the same when you've got someone upset, crying, yelling, distressed, and you've got time pressures around you as well. So I think those placements are actually very, very important learning points for how you transition from an academic environment into actually doing the work. Anyone else? Yeah.
I'll agree. That's where social work, I'm not saying that it's better than psychology, but in social work, in third year, you've got to do your placement, which is 3 or 4 months, depending on how many hours you do. And in fourth year, use those times to really think about, is this the type of work that I want to do? And you will see that not everything that you've learned in textbooks is how it's done in the real world. That's what those placements are about, for you to familiarise yourself with a work environment. And if you are able to just even do only 1 unit, some students try and do the placement plus another 3 units in that, and then they haven't got that headspace there. If there's any way that you could just do your placement, well and truly, that's great, because you can just concentrate on that. Or if you just can do 1 unit, don't overload yourself and really think this is what it's, because you will get exposed to things that you're going to get exposed in the real world. So the placements, I agree.
Working for NT Health, we have a professional practice supervision policy whereby all allied health workers are linked up with someone to get supervision. As psychologists, it's part of our profession, and you get more supervision in your first 2 years out, which is a specific time to sit down and discuss your work. So certainly very well supported. And I guess one of the reasons I've enjoyed working in health is that there are always colleagues somewhere around the corner, up the other end of the hospital, someone I can ring on the phone. So certainly that's the case. The main thing I would say is just being really kind on yourself, that you're new to this profession. I don't expect a psychologist in their first year of training to do what I would expect someone who's in their 10th year of training or 20th year of training to do. So, it will take you more time. You won't know it. And hey, maybe when you change jobs again, you'll feel like you're back at the start in some ways, but that's okay. So really being really kind on yourself. I think you get to be real experts at studying in uni, and then you go into the workforce and you go, I know I slept very, very well for the first 3 or 4 months of full-time work. Yes, it was a really different pace from uni.
Yes, very quickly. Placements, definitely. The number of people in my counselling degree who got employment through their placements, and then there was no onboarding, there was no, they were already part of the organisation. And just, recognising that, you can read every book in the world about how to ride a bike, but until you actually get on a bike and actually practice, and fall over, reading those books won't actually get you any closer.
Coming back to how do you transfer those skills that you've learned at uni, I would say that just remember that there's an onus on the organisation to help you transition into the role that they've identified for you. And so I would be hoping and expecting that they'd place someone alongside you as a psychologist. So you're firstly going to be having a huge orientation to the organisation, so you get to understand how the systems work together, where you're physically located, what, like understanding even how to use the computer or the data collection system, all of those sorts of practical aspects of your role. You'd be expecting the organisation to take some ownership of that process for you and help steer you into before they sort of like flood you with a whole lot of clients. So you'd be confident to have that level of expectation of them, and very likely they'll allocate someone either as a supervisor or as a mentor in the workplace that's going to walk alongside you, just to help you really settle into that space.
Question at the back. No, the lady with the blue hair. Up front.
So I can probably be loud enough to hold it. You can all hear me, is that okay?
Yep.
Yep. So my name's Christy, but I'm practical with that confidence we're all talking about. I really want to thank you all for the time and the advice you've given us today, because it really means a lot. So I'd like to ask you, I've probably asked a million questions.
That's for the networking.
If I could just ask one, I would say these sorts of roles can be really heavy sometimes and be really prone to burnout. So what advice would you give to us as to what has helped you maintain your role so we can practice this for as long as possible and ensure our well-being is maintained throughout that career? So what's been most important?
Okay, so supervision is one of those places where that will really hold you within your profession. I'm talking from a psychology point of view, but I'm sure it's the same in social work as well. I think having a really strong understanding, a clear understanding and the capacity to hold boundary, particularly around what's mine to carry and what's not mine to carry, or who is the person that needs now the responsibility for this. So if you can understand those types of things right at the very start, it'll really help you to stay within your own lane. And then there's always going to be someone that you can draw down on with their additional knowledge to help you. But also at a personal level, outside of the workplace, having your own self-care practice, whether it's ensuring that you stay socially connected with people, that you have opportunities to relax, that you're eating and hydrating well, that you're sleeping well, all of those really practical things, that will help you function in the workplace. And I think importantly, remember that work is only a part of your life. That's not everything. And if you can get that balance right at the very start, it'll see you really well.
I agree. Supervision, supervision, supervision. The AASW has said that it is dangerous for social workers that do not seek supervision. And if you start a new job, I'm sure that that organisation would ensure that you have supervision. If you start a new job and they don't have supervision in place, please ask about it. Because if there's not another social worker there in that organisation, they can link you with another organisation, that social worker, or if there's a psychologist there, it doesn't have to be you. That it's the employer's obligation to ensure that you are receiving supervision, and it's your obligation to make sure that you attend supervision and that you continually do it. I still get supervision after many years. Without that, I'd be a basket case.
No, I think you've covered it. I think that's it.
Yeah, I'll just emphasize that supervision. In fact, it's a requirement, at least certainly of PACFA, the counselling. You must do supervision to stay accredited. You must stay accredited to keep your job, because they recognise that. And also, as Angela said, boundaries. So I am not a counsellor. I just work as one. So if I have a bad day, if I feel like I'm not counselling very well, that's actually not reflecting on me. It doesn't mean I'm not doing very well necessarily. It doesn't mean that, it's simply a part of my life. And especially if you can early on try and maintain those boundaries between your professional life and your personal life, because they are not necessarily the same thing, and ideally they're not. I think a lot of us, when we're asked about ourselves, we will say our job is the first thing, as if that is sort of the most important thing about us, and it is not necessarily the most important thing about us. So yeah, definitely boundaries.
Awesome. I might leave it there. If anyone does have any more questions, please head out, network, talk with all our beautiful representatives, but join me in thanking the panel for their fabulous contributions today. So we do have a number of different organisations outside, including Workforce Australia, Kentish Community Services, Territory Families, Housing and Communities, Early Careers Team, Department of Education, Open Arms, Danila Dilba, Gallagher Bassett, NEMI National, Office of the Chief Allied Health Officer, Amber NT, Life is OK, Anglicare, Headspace, Team Health, Mission Australia. Oh my goodness, where does the list end? So many people for you to go and talk with out there. So while you're networking, be brave, be confident, ask lots of questions, and have a fabulous time. Thank you so much for coming today.
great doing a panel with you. Nice to meet you. Great to meet you, John.
Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you, Karen.
Thanks so much for your time and wonderful answers.
You have a cardigan.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yes, absolutely.